Hi everyone, and welcome to this short demonstration of how we can use Developer Cloud Service to assist in the management of our Application Express development projects. Now, what we're going to do is go through a series of steps using different tools as appropriate. So first of all, we're going to use Application Express in our local development environment to make some changes to our application and then export that application to in this case my local laptop, and then we'll save those changes into our local Git repository in our development environment. Then we'll switch over to using our Git client, and I'm going to be using a tool called SourceTree, but you could use any Git client, which would include JDeveloper or SQL Developer, or just Git commands. And what we're going to do is commit the changes to that file into our local Git repository and then push those changes up to our hosted Git repository in Developer Cloud Service. We're then going to switch over and go into Developer Cloud Service and review those changes and review some of the key files that we're going to be working with. And then we'll go into the build element of Developer Cloud Service, which is the Hudson Continuous Integration Engine, and we're going to look at a build job that we've got defined, which will be automatically triggered by the receipt of a changed file into our Developer Cloud Service repository. And we'll see how that's configured. And then once we've run that, we will log into our test environment, which is a remote database running in the Oracle Cloud, and we'll see that the new version of the app has been automatically moved through into that and installed, triggered by the change to our Developer Cloud Service repository. Now obviously that build job could go on and also trigger the execution of automated testing processes, but in our case we'll just log in manually and look at the new version of the app to confirm that it does have the changes that we expected. So let's get right into it. Now what we'll do first of all is just quickly have a look at Developer Cloud Service. It may well be that many of you are quite familiar with Developer Cloud Service, but just in case you're not, it's a very easy to use tool and it's managed through a series of tabs across the top which give access to the different areas of functionality. We can see here that we're working in a particular project called Jules 1. Can have as many projects as we need. And here on the home page, we've got a chronological series of activities, and we can see that I was working on this 2 weeks ago. I was also working on it earlier today, and there were a number of build jobs that were executed, Hudson build jobs, and we can see that we've had changes pushed up into the repository from other repositories locally or elsewhere. Now the other areas we're going to be looking at here are the code area, which is the repository, and we can see that this is the repository that we're working on, apexdevcs.git. We can have multiple repositories in a project. I'm just using one, and obviously we may have different branches in our repository as well, and again we're just working for this demo in the master branch. Now within our repository we've got a series of files and folders, and the only ones that are really relevant to this demo are DBCS, where we have a series of scripts, one of which is the key script that we're going to be working with today, and this is the script that's actually going to be triggered by the build job. And you can see that it's first of all copying a couple of files from our repository, from the DBCS folder to our database. And we're also then going to be logging into our remote database at the IP address that's going to be passed across as a parameter, and we're going to log into SQL Plus, use the password and ID that's provided, and execute the file that we've copied across called updateapp.sql, and that will in turn execute our new application file to load that new version into our remote database. Okay, and you can see, the previous existence or the current existence of files in these folders. So 16 minutes ago, I rehearsed this demonstration, and we can see that certain files were changed and certain folders were changed there. So the SQL folder was changed 16 minutes ago. we can see there that the actual file that was changed 16 minutes ago was new Apex app, because that's the one we're going to change, as I'll explain in a moment. Okay, so that's the repository that we're working with, and that's synchronized with my local Git repository. And if we go over to the Build tab, we can see that we've got a number of Hudson build jobs defined here. So these are used in a fuller form of the demonstration. But the one that we're interested in here is update Apex app v2. We can see that the last execution was successful, that in general we've got a mixed kind of result. We've had some failures. 2 out of the last 5 have failed. So that gives us a kind of a cloudy weather symbol there. But if we look at this, we can see how it's defined. We can see the overview here that we've had, a history of quite a lot of failures and some successes, but that's absolutely fine because this is a new version of this build which I've been recently building and testing. And we can see that on average it's taking about 18 seconds to run. How is it defined? So if we hit the configure button, we can see that we've got some text that describes what it's doing, and we can see that it's triggered by source code management polling. So it's triggered off by a change to something within our repository. But what? So that's defined in the source control tab here, and we can see first of all that we're using the same repository that we've been working with, apexdevcs.git. That's what we'd expect. And down here in advanced settings, we can see that what will trigger this build job is a change to this file, new apexapp.sql in the folder SQL in the folder dbcs. Just that file. So we can be very specific about what will trigger this job. Alternatively, we could have just left it at dbcs, and we could say that any change to any file within any subfolders would trigger this. Or we could give a specific list of files, or we could just exclude certain folders or files, or we could exclude any changes created by a certain user. So it's a very flexible environment, really very productive and easy to use. So it's that particular file, apexapp.sql, that we're going to be looking to trigger this job from. So what actually happens? Well, this is where we look at the build step. We can have multiple build steps, and they can be shell scripts, ant processing, and various different forms. But we've just got the one build step, and it's a shell script execution of the script dbcs scripts update apex app v2.shell, which is the one we were just looking at earlier. It will copy the files and then log in SQL Plus and run the driver file. And we're passing those parameters in here with the IP address of our target and the user ID and password. Now these could be more generically parameterized, of course, but just for the demo they're built in here like that. Okay, so that's essentially I think all we need to look at before just running through the demo. So we'll see it queued here when it all happens. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our change to our application. So this is not an Application Express demo, so I'm just going to make a couple of minor changes. So I'll first of all just change the internal title to say DevCS demo, so that's what it's called internally. And now we'll change the user interface to, rather than just say My Climbing Logbook v1.2 at the top of the page, we're going to have an image, a logo, if you will. So this is a convention within Apex. This is how we refer to a file that we've already loaded into our Apex workspace. So that's all we need to do there. So now we'll run the new version of the application, and we'll see that we've got the logo file here. That's the change we were looking for. And you can see also that this color scheme that we've got is probably not really ideal. So what we're going to do is use the theme roller tool within Apex to just switch to a different color scheme. Okay, so we've now switched to the standard Vita color scheme, so greys and blues, which is probably a little bit more acceptable. We'll set that as current. Okay. And this is really just a standard Apex application. You can see we've got a standard interactive report page with all of the standard functionality in here. all this kind of stuff, full data maintenance capabilities. And also we've got a master detail capability here where we can maintain and manage data both about the cliffs that the rock climbs are on and details of climbs on each particular cliff. So various ways to manage the data. But we're not here to discuss Apex. This is just an illustration of how we're making a change to our application. Okay, and that's the change that we need to move across into our development environment. So if we switch over to our development environment, we can see here we've still got the old version of the application, climbing logbook v1.2. And if we run that, you'll see that that's exactly what we've got. The old version with my climbing logbook v1.2 in text and the older greeny purpley colour scheme. And that's what we're going to expect to change after we've gone through the process. So, very straightforward. We just do the standard application export from Apex, as we would do on a regular basis anyway. And we'll save that to a file by default given the application name, f102.sql, sorry, application number, and that will go to my desktop. So, here it is, f102.sql. So what we need to do now is just move that into my local Git repository as a file called newapexapp.sql. If you remember, this is the one that's going to trigger the process. So newapexapp.sql, I've renamed it. I move it into my local Git repository and replace the one that's there. So newapexapp.sql now has a timestamp of 1156. That's the latest version. If I go to my Git client, as you can see, I'm using source tree here, and we can see it's already established that there are some uncommitted changes, just the one, to the file that we would expect. We can see that's been modified. So I would now simply commit that change locally. So a new logo and UI theme. That's fine. And we can see that we've got that up here, new logo and UI theme, and we can see that we've got one commit that is available to push up to our hosted central repository. So I'll now do this, and this is what will trigger the execution of that build job to move the file and install it. So if I quickly go back to Developer Cloud Service to the home page, we should first of all see that we've pushed up a change from our local repository to the master in Apex. That's correct, just a couple of minutes ago. And if I quickly go to the build tab, we can already see that that job is now queued. Now the way the Hudson system works is that when jobs are queued, they're not automatically executed. There's a polling process that runs every 30 seconds to look for jobs on the queue. So typically a job will take, on average, I guess, around 15 seconds before it's triggered off. Could be more, could be less. So we can now see that that job is underway. It's in process, 11% done. And if we scroll down slightly, you can see that it's in process here as well. Now 90% complete, and we can see that's now completed and has successfully completed, which is exactly what we hope to see. So what we can see here then is we can look at the last execution, and we can see that it was successful and that it was triggered by this change. And if I click on there, I could have done this also from the repository tab because it switched us over to the repository tab. We can see that it's basically a very similar file but just with a different timestamp, and there will be some further differences further down in the definition of the application to reflect that change to the title and change to the colour scheme. We can also look at the console output. It's a bit wordy, but we can see here that it did indeed execute our shell script, Apex App, update Apex App v2. Passed it those parameters, IP address, user ID, password. There they are being passed across. It's now starting to work. It's copying those files, executing the first file and then importing the application from the second file. That's the one that we actually created by exporting from Apex in our development environment. And you can see here, obviously, that it's connecting to SQL Plus to execute our export Apex file, which is, of course, the same file that we use to run the import process at the other end. And then that's all of the output from that import process, which is successful. So that's great. And finally, we can look at the Git logs if we want to, just to see what happened in the repository and details of that change that triggered off the process. So that's great. So finally, we can now go across to our remote database environment running in the Oracle Cloud, the target environment that we're moving the changes to. This is our test environment. So we can see that at the moment we've got the old version, Climbing Logbook v1.2, and as soon as we refresh the page, we see first of all that it's got a new internal title, devcs.demo, and when we run the app, we'll need to log in again because it's effectively a brand new application. And we'll see that indeed we have got the logo, and we have returned to a slightly more conventional colour scheme with the blues and the greys in there, rather than the purple and green that, to be honest, a lot of people might not like so much. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. That's essentially the end of the demonstration that's shown us how we can use Developer Cloud Service to control and manage and automate the way we move changes from our Application Express development environment through into our Application Express test environment, utilizing local environments and also cloud environments as well. So thanks very much.